First up, a pro-Palestinian statement that was issued by Harvard University students blaming Israel for the ongoing conflict and violence in the region that has sparked off a massive outrage.
A coalition of 35 student organizations released a statement assigning full responsibility to the Israeli government for the ongoing violence, citing decades of occupation, labeling it an apartheid regime.
So the student bodies also justified the action by Hamas terrorists and said that the events did not occur in a vacuum for the last 2 decades, as millions of Palestinians in Gaza have been forced to live in open-air prisons. So that has been the statement so far that has been coming in. However, this has created a divide, especially when it comes to those multiple organizations there, as they have come out openly, also calling out to Israel and has been saying that this is the atrocities that has been meted out and this is the right cause for the Palestinian cause that has now been fought by the Hamas terrorists. And this is also coming at a time when the Harvard student bodies have been facing a lot of flack, a lot of backlash after blaming Israel for the Hamas attack. And a lot of criticism that a signing of a statement wherein they hold Israel entirely responsible for Hamas's attack. Meanwhile, Harvard authorities have also issued a statement amid the backlash that has now been coming.
So let's talk about the two versions, and we'll put out the letter proof as well. If we talk about the letter by the 31 Harvard students group, they've condemned Israel. They've said Hamas attack did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinians continue to live in an open-air prison for over 2 decades. Those are some of the details as have been opined in this letter by Harvard student groups. If we talk about the Harvard faculty, it says every innocent death is a tragedy, and this should not mislead us to create false equivalences between the actions leading to this loss. So they've outrightly condemned the ugly face of terror of the Hamas, says Hamas planned and executed the murder and kidnapping of civilians, particularly women, children and elderly, with no military or other specific objective. So that's the rebuttal that's come in from the Harvard faculty. Let's quickly take it across to Amita, who's joining us with the entire letter.
Absolutely. This letter which created a lot of controversy as far as these organizations that are concerned, because they have been saying that the events did not happen all of a sudden. It was a vacuum that was created for the last 2 decades as the Palestinians have been fighting for their land, for their cause, and in Gaza who have been forced to live in open-air prisons. Let's tell you exactly when it comes to this letter and the highlights of the letter. They have been saying Israeli regime is responsible completely, especially when it comes to the kind of atrocities that are now being witnessed for unfolding violence. Palestinians on the other side in Gaza who are forced to live in open-air prisons. They have been saying in the letter that Palestinians have no shelters for refuge or even to escape. And they have been also saying that Palestinians have now been forced to live in a state of death. They have also taken a firm stand in the letter against colonial retaliation that they say is now required. These are the 35 student bodies, and that has created a divide. That has also created on the kind of criticism and the backlash that they are facing with this statement.
All right, let's talk about the faculty's response, though. In response to the statement, the faculty, of course, has spoken of how this is unimaginable. The faculty says that the stand by the student bodies can be seen as nothing less than condoning the mass murder of civilians based only on their nationality. But after this massive uproar, some of the student bodies have withdrawn their signatures from the letter. And well, after blaming Israel for Hamas attack, Harvard student bodies continue to face backlash. But Congress defends the pro-Palestine stand. We have another reaction coming in from Congress's Harish Rawat, who says the debates must happen on campus. What's wrong with discussing Israel? Clearly, once again, not coming out to condemn the Hamas brutality in as many words. Listen in.
हार्वर्ड जैसी विश्वविद्यालय में, जैसे विश्वविद्यालयों में, दूसरे विश्वविद्यालयों में, जेएनयू में इस पर चर्चाएं नहीं होंगी, मंथन नहीं होगा। और मंथन में अलग अलग राय हो सकती हैं, तो इसका मतलब है कि कोई राय आपके विपरीत है तो आप उस राय को न रिजेक्ट करने का आपको अधिकार है, मगर उसको लेकर के किसी को थ्रेटन करना ये बड़ा दुर्भाग्यजनक है। और कॉर्पोरेट फोर्सेज यदि इस तरीके से सोचने लग जाएंगी तो ये और दुर्भाग्यजनक है।
In the meantime, we have Madhav Das Gopalakrishnan joining us live here on the broadcast and introducing our guests as well. Rashmi Saman, who is an author, and Ahmad Ayaz, who is a lawyer and a political analyst as well. Good afternoon to all of you. Madhav, I really want to understand, especially when it comes to the response that has now been coming in to these student bodies who in a way have written this letter favoring the acts and the atrocities that are now being done by the Hamas terror group.
Well, it's a very important story, and for a couple of reasons. One is that this is one of the world's most renowned universities that we're talking about, where in fact studying from various disciplines is considered to be in fact of the highest level. And in that sense, I mean, of course, to preface my comments, I want to mention that when there is a conflict like this happening, there are obviously going to be huge damages on ground in terms of life, of property, and also of innocents who may get caught in the crossfire. Collateral damage certainly is there, and nothing is going to take away from the humanitarian crisis that is going to face those who are innocents on either side as far as this particular conflict is concerned. But what's happened in this particular case is that the letter that has been written by the students' body choosing to put the entire onus on Israel, and at the same time appearing to, with that kind of onus, exonerate the role of Hamas, which has carried out this pre-planned attack. Clearly it has been a coordinated one, because over 1,500 Hamas terrorists have been gunned down or neutralized by the Israeli forces since that attack happened on Saturday. Close to 1,000 Israelis have also lost their lives in these pre-planned attacks. It's an escalation like perhaps has never before been seen in that entire region. And that is why to try and whitewash the role of Hamas is something that is seen as extremely controversial. In India too, we've had a controversy where we have seen leaders come out and support Palestine of different political persuasions and parties and regions of India. They have, while they might have every right to raise the cause of the individuals who may be affected in that entire Palestine region, the fact is that to in a way whitewash the role of a terrorist organization like Hamas is extremely problematic. And that is why you have the Teachers Association there in Harvard who've written a letter to counter that, saying that this is going to send out an extremely wrong perspective at a time when the United States itself, where the Harvard University is located, has sent out a huge amount of support, both in terms of hardware and in terms of security in the form of aircraft carriers, etc., that have been sent to Israel. It's an extremely problematic position to have in the United States, which itself has been a victim of terror, much like India has been in the past. So that's why this is an extremely controversial aspect. We've already seen some of the student bodies like the Harvard Nepali Association, for instance, withdraw their support to this particular letter. Certain individual students have also come out to say that this is not the stand and this is not the pain or grief that we wanted to cause by articulating this view, and that's why they've withdrawn their support from this particular letter. So it's certainly going to be a massive controversy as far as one of the world's most renowned universities is concerned, and at the same time has its own implications here in India, because there are still political parties, leaders who are coming out to say that universities are, of course, breeding grounds for such kind of debates to take place. What's wrong with that? While debates are certainly welcome, justifying in a way what has been one of the worst terror strikes or terror attacks that we've seen, not just in Israel, but perhaps globally in recent days, that's certainly something that is extremely problematic. And if you're going to come out and justify terror, then really, of course, as a nation which has victim of terror, whether India can articulate its position that it has on the past on several platforms and several occasions, whether all of that is still sustainable is certainly a very important question.
Absolutely, because there was no formal declaration of war here, Madhav. These were millions of Israelis who were jolted awake to the sound of explosion and siren alarms. Rashmi, who better than you to really help us understand how these Ivy Leagues function, and most importantly, how much importance they give to freedom of speech. But what's problematic here is the kind of comparison that is being made, don't you think? The kind of comparison that is being made with regards to the Palestinian cause and the Israeli oppression, wherein this is a direct conflict between innocent civilians based in Israel and armed terrorists of the Hamas.
Exactly. From my perspective, having lived and studied at Oxford, I've seen that in these top universities, there exists an intellectual ideological bias. And the ideological bias, unfortunately, makes way for intellectual cover fire every time there is conflict across the world. And I think it's absolutely problematic that ideological bias has blinded students and student bodies for a while now from taking a stance that is, very apt for that particular situation. Here, instead of actually evaluating the current conflict as the one between, innocent Israelis and Hamas terrorists, they're again making statements based on the whole ideological bias that exists with respect to how Palestine is viewed in these top Ivy Leagues. And I think that's extremely problematic. And when it comes to the statements that we see coming out, there exists a very weird system where, there are a couple of student bodies, and not necessarily all students do subscribe to these statements. The signing of the statements is in the hands of the few who run the, student groups or student clubs. More often than not, these clubs are not even, registered to the university. I've seen it during my own time. But because the fact that the word Harvard or Oxford is associated with the name of the society, independently registered or registered with the university, they start getting more traction and unfortunately, have a big role in shaping opinions across the world. I'm sure that many students, I think I did read an article about one student not even knowing that her name was signatory to this problematic letter. And I think it is testament to the way that this entire nexus operates and how ideological bias, unfortunately, has faltered freedom of speech and healthy discussions on campuses, and how, we've all reduced to giving intellectual cover fire to ideological debates happening across the world. And I think that's extremely problematic.
That happens if one agrees with it or not. Having an opinion these days seems to be all the more important, or even when it comes to taking sides. Ahmed Aya, sir, violence begets violence, sir. And these are inhumane acts that are now being meted out to those Israeli innocent civilians, sir, by Hamas armed terrorists. It cannot be condoned in any other way, especially those letters that has now been receiving a lot of flack.
No, it's not the students group in the Harvard University alone. There are so many others, at individual level, or people at the collectively who must have come out and criticized the action of the Israel too. Why? Because Israel being an organized government, and they are supposed to work under some framework of the law. And as long as Hamas is concerned, nobody justifies whatever they have done as regards the killing of the civilians. Nobody justifies that too. But the point is, then you'll have to see in a retaliation by the Israel. And then what are they going to do? They are also killing the innocents have been killed in the Gaza. So this being an issue which has an impact world over, and naturally everybody would like to get involved and discuss about it, and more particularly the students.
No, but the letter by the students group, Mr. Ayaz, very clearly says that it holds Israeli regime entirely responsible for all the unfolding violence. What's your stated position? Are you in agreement to that sentiment?
This being the action of this magnitude has an impact world over, and then anybody can discuss about. So if the people have come, after all, say you are living in a world where you have freedom to speak, you have freedom of expression. Anybody is entitled to his opinion. If the students have expressed their opinion, well, they are within their opinion, and you may not agree with that opinion. That's a different thing. But you cannot, it's not it's a very peaceful action by writing a letter.
Where is the conscience gone? Where is the morality gone? Right,
and here it's not just an opinion, it's not a political opinion that is being made. It's justifying violence. It is justifying killing of innocents. It is justifying killing of, people who have nothing to do with the conflict. One of the women was brutally murdered and paraded around by these Hamas terrorists. That alone should be enough to garner condemnation of the Hamas terrorists from across the world, if there's even one shred of humanity left.
Sir, call them out. Ahmed Aya, sir, call them out. The terrorism and the barbaric face of Hamas, sir, please call them out.
The problem here is, when we mean condemnation to the people who cause, casualties or who kill innocents, we don't see the other side also. Well, while we condemn the action of the Hamas
Sir,
having killed
Israel has
the
made it very clear, Mr. Ahmad
then-
Ayaz, this is retaliatory action. They need to defend their own land. The first thing,
Land, but-
as
but
a
in no
citizen,
case-
as a
but in no
responsible
case-
citizen, Mr. Ayaz, is to condemn any act of terror. Now, giving it another name is where the problem begins. That's where the problem lies.
See, propaganda has historically whitewashed crimes. We know how massacres of indigenous people, even in Canada, was whitewashed with this kind of fancy terminology. And what the Harvard students currently are trying to do with this letter is basically whitewash mass-scale violence. So many Jews have never been, killed in a single day as the current conflict ever since the Holocaust, and that alone is enough to show the magnitude of this violence that is unfolding. And any other statement or opinion coming out is simply, theories trying to whitewash and justify this kind of violence. And I think that's extremely problematic. And it is detrimental to how this conflict will unfold, how the world will respond to it, and what we become as a society in the future.
Right, so
We
Mr.
will be
Ayaz,
used to a society that
Rashmi, I want to come in.
justifies
Mr.
violence.
Ayaz, you highlighted how the Palestinians are also now facing the heat of the Israeli counter-strikes. If the Hamas was so concerned about the Palestinians, it would have not launched this kind of an offensive at this kind of a scale. Did it not?
No, it
did
is-
it not see the Israeli counter-strikes coming, sir? The kind of military
It's
capability
not-
Israel enjoys, this was going to happen
No.
sooner or later.
No, it's not only
If they were so
the
concerned
counter-
about the Palestinians, they would have not unleashed this ugly face of terror on innocent civilians in Israel.
No.
What are
you
we
see,
trying to defend here?
It is not only the counter strike today. What has happened for last so many months, rather years, that the security force, that the forces, Israeli forces, have been entering the Gaza and trying to capture the land and creating, making people to flee from there. There are a lot of people in the Palestine who have taken refuge in other neighboring countries.
Really,
So
because that's not what's been happening for the past 15
then more
years.
importantly,
Hamas
no,
has been trying
importantly-
consistently to attack Israelis, to provoke Israelis, to
importantly-
Sir, Ayaz, sir,
Importantly-
the problem also begins if you talk about Hamas being the true representatives to the Palestinian cause, sir. Call out
No,
Hamas as a
absolutely.
terror group, as a terror organization,
That is
sir.
there. That is a, that
Because
is a
it is
militant
high time that
organization.
the oppressor must not be labeled as a victim.
That is a militant organization. There is no doubt about that. It is accepted fact. But the point is
It's
that
a terror
we also
organization, not a militant
we also debate and talk about it when certain situations take place. This is the unfortunate part of it. That's what I say. Otherwise, we have been seeing that there's a Baitul
Okay.
Muqaddas, known as the mosque, Aqsa, mosque, Aqsa. And
Okay.
people
Without
have
consent,
not
what's
been in
the
a
only
position to-
question here that one is forced to ask is whether or not there should be blatant condemnation of this kind of an act of terror. We're going to have to leave it at that. Rashmi, Mr. Ayaz, thank you for joining us. Over to Madhav, he's joining us with a very important voice.
Well, thanks so much for that, Christine. In fact, let's now quickly go across